Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Infinite Crossover. It's going to be a good one this week. A lot of news going on this week. Before we get into the main topic, I want to first say thanks to all the staff of Capeless and FBI, Flame Boys Incorporated staff. You guys are doing a great job. Tons of awesome articles out there. You guys are keeping us lively. Some great articles out there, as well as today, some awesome new articles. Transformers 4 just came out at 3 o'clock this morning, Eastern Standard Time. Extended Flash trailer, more Batman news. It's just crazy. But guys, thank you so much for all the hard work you've been doing, and this partnership is awesome. It's going very well, and I'm very happy. And I couldn't do it without my co-host and partner in crime, the creator of CapelessCrusader.org, Mr. Josh Epstein. How are you, sir?
Oh, I'm hanging in there. Running on fumes today, but yeah, there's been a lot of really good stuff going up. Just trying to keep track of everything that's been going on. Just this last week has been insane. Was looking at a tweet from Jeff Johns earlier today, and with the announcement of all the different times for DC shows.
Oh yeah.
With the exception of Constantine at Fridays on Fridays at 8. It's like Monday at 8 is going to be Gotham. Tuesday at 8 is going to be The Flash. Wednesday at 8 is going to be Arrow. Friday at 10 is going to be Constantine. Somewhere in there, I mean, I think I read that Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is going to be moving to 9 o'clock.
Oh, they don't want to compete against Arrow for the 8 o'clock time slot.
Well, I think that.
Come on.
I don't know if that's it or not, but I mean that would be silly of them to do that.
Come on, I want to see who wins.
No, but that would just be a dumb move for them to try and actually compete at the same time.
But they are competing in the theaters.
And well, I still think that's going to wind up changing somewhere in the next year. Though it would be really cool. I very much doubt. I think somebody's going to blink in that little dick measuring contest.
Josh, do you think it's like a version of chicken? Who's gonna pull out first, or gonna turn a road chicken? You know, going for head to head. You seen who can last the longest before somebody says, "Okay, we'll change the date."
And I think in all likelihood it'll wind up being Captain America.
Really?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Huh. Okay. So Marvel might back out first, huh?
Well, I think that they're gonna be smart and realize that Batman is just really difficult to compete with. Period.
I agree. I mean, we can see that here when we do articles. You put Batman on it in our article views just jump. I mean, it's crazy. No matter what you put Batman on, it does very well. Before we get into the topic, though, I want to geek out. Can we geek out for a second? Because you and I,
sure.
We haven't. We've been so busy in the background. You over in Capeless, me on FBI. We haven't had time to really chat, except for logistics, stats. This isn't working. What's going on over here? Flash, man. Flash trailer, fucking amazing.
I mean, I wish that there was more to it.
Of course.
But there was. It was definitely pretty freaking awesome looking. Like the way they're doing super speed in this is obviously miles and miles better than what we got back in the 90s, and looks a heck of a lot better than what we had even in Smallville. It doesn't look like it's quite what we saw in Man of Steel.
Right.
But it still looks like it's going to be pretty doggone cool, and he has such a great attitude about him. Like, he's such a nerd, which I think is going to go over really well. Arrow, for as much as I love it, it's a very grim show. It's very serious. Ollie is very moody, and it looks very much like Barry is going to be very lighthearted and really enjoy having superpowers and being a superhero. And I think that's gonna be a really cool addition to it. I just hope that eventually they do wind up connecting the TV and the film stuff. Everybody asks me when I'm talking with folks online, is this going to be the same universe as the movies? Because that's sort of the idea Marvel has established now with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And right now we still don't know. I mean, they haven't said yes or no one way or the other yet. I think it's very much going to depend on if Flash is successful. I think Arrow has very obviously been successful. Whether or not the Flash that we see in the TV show winds up being the Flash who shows up in the movies. I think that's going to depend on how well he does and how well that show does.
No, I agree with you. It's a good compliment to Arrow. And it seems like we're going more towards the Wally West attitude, the prankster type, jokester kind of feel. Do you think?
Well, a lot of people nowadays consider that to be very much Wally West, particularly since Barry Allen came back and has been shown as this very straightforward, no nonsense type guy. But it's sort of reminds me a lot of the old Flash stuff from the 60s and 70s, and Barry used to have a lot more fun. Before he died. Before he died, he was a lot more fun.
Before he got jaded and came back to life and. That's too funny.
I think that they'll be fine, and I'm sure at some point we will get, if the show lasts long enough, we'll get Wally West.
Yeah, I think so. I think we'll see the Flash family now. Merging the universes, how would we feel now that we have another DC property on a whole other network? Is Constantine going to be totally separate universe, considering that?
Oh, I think it will, and it's such a totally different. It's a totally different genre.
Of course.
It's really only been recently that Constantine has had much to do with the regular DC universe. Period.
Right, but Justice
League used to be his whole own thing. Yeah, used to be his whole own thing anyway, and I think that's likely what they're going to do, and that's why it's on NBC and it's not on the CW.
Mm-hmm. So CW is the new 52 and NBC is Vertigo?
Basically, yeah. And I think that they're just sort of looking at... I am not going to be surprised if Gotham only lasts one season.
Really?
Well, I mean, they parked it in the Friday Night Death slot.
Yeah, that's true.
Or not the Friday Night Death slot, but they put it right up against Monday Night
Football, right.
On Mondays on Fox. Fox has a history of criminally mishandling even really good shows, and I honestly think it's just them putting some Batman stuff out on a screen for a year, tops maybe two, before we get Batman versus Superman.
Maybe it's just kind of leading up to that, get everybody still interested in everything.
Yeah, because I mean, otherwise we're not gonna. Batman's not gonna be doing too much over the next year, other than Gotham. I mean, they canceled his cartoon. I haven't heard about any new animated movies scheduled to come out. So really, what we have is the Arkham game, the next Arkham game to come out.
Well, you do have Batman Beware.
Gotham.
Beware of Batman. You do have that running on.
That got canceled too.
Nope, it's running at.
They're finishing out the last episodes.
Yeah,
they're
finishing out the last episodes. Yeah, they're redoing them.
But they're not making any more.
No, but that still runs for 11 weeks or so. So I still consider that. Before we weren't even going to get those 11 episodes. So once again,
yeah,
just
but that's
like
kind of like
Network.
Once your house has been foreclosed and they're like, you can still live here for 6 more months, but we're taking the house.
Well, from what we heard, they weren't even going to air those 11 episodes, just like Fox mishandling their time slots. I mean, Cartoon Network's like, yeah, all right, you got 11 of them, we'll throw them on Adult Swim. All right, see you later, goodbye. Not even really caring.
Well, yeah, I mean, it would have been silly of them not to air them because they have them, they made them. I mean, why pay for more shows to be produced when you don't have to? I mean, that's just bad business. So no, I mean, it's gonna be really interesting to see if any of us are able to keep up with all the comic book shows on a week-to-week basis next year.
Yeah, tell me about it. I'm like, that's there's
because you're gonna have one on Monday, two on Tuesday. We don't know when Agent Carter is gonna be yet, so then there's at least another one on Wednesday. Right now, nothing on Thursday, and then one on Friday. Nothing on Saturday yet. And then Sunday is Walking Dead.
Oh my God! I mean, don't get any ideas, but that's like a pod a day, dude. That's 2 pods a day that we'd have to do to keep up with all this crap. Don't get any ideas. Don't get any ideas.
I got too many ideas already.
I've seen your messages to me. I'm like, oh my God.
Unless we forget Netflix too, because the Netflix stuff is coming.
Yeah, but that goes all out in one whack. So that's like Daredevil will get all 13 episodes all at once. So I mean, I'll sit down for a day and whack them out.
Yeah, well, and I think that's what most people are gonna do too. And Joe Quesada talked about that. That's kind of the expectation, is that most people are going to sit down and binge watch 3, 4, 5 episodes at a time, or the entire show as soon as it comes out. So they're making, Daredevil in particular. They've talked about. They said it's one big movie. It's going to feel less like a TV show and more like a 13-hour-long movie.
Right. And this kind of goes right into the topic that we wanted to talk about, is the future of comics and just the culture as a whole, where we see this going.
Well, that wasn't quite what I meant when I talked about visions of the future. With the next thing up in comic book movies is Days of Future Past, which is only 8 days out now as we're recording this.
Yes.
And it got me to thinking as I was looking at it that particularly right now you've got that coming out in theaters. You've got Future's End for DC going on as their big event. We're constantly seeing this idea in comics of what the future is going to look like.
Oh, I got you.
Whether it's what we see in X-Men, which is basically the future sucks, everybody's going to die. That tends to be what we see on the Marvel side in particular, that if we hear anything about the future, it's everybody's going to die. Everything's terrible. All of us are dead or in prison camps, or we've lost all our powers, or the Earth is, thrown off its axis or something like that. DC has a little bit more positivity in some aspects. The biggest example probably being the Legion of Superheroes. We see life's okay by the time you get around to the 31st century. And then even in independent stuff, usually we get this vision of the future that is very dark. And I kind of wonder at times why that is. So
because it leads to boring stories.
Well, it does.
If everybody's happy and everything's good, what kind of story are you going to have out of that?
Well, I mean, Legion of Superheroes. If we want to talk about positive looks to the future first, Legion of Superheroes shows basically a Star Trek future for humanity, where we've gotten over most of our problems here on Earth, and we've directed any lingering racism is towards the outside species. Where we're part of an interplanetary alliance. There are people with superpowers literally everywhere. Compared to life on planet Earth today, life in the 31st century seems pretty awesome in Legion of Superheroes. And then even in some of the...
Doesn't it lack, though, like creative storytelling, or I mean, I don't know. I mean, I've read some of the Legion stuff back in the day, but I'm looking at it from a writer or creator standpoint. I mean, how many pages can you watch people being happy and prosper when I'm just,
Legion of Superheroes has run since the 1960s, basically.
True.
I mean, in one form or another. So I mean, obviously and Star Trek is, if we're comparing Legion of Superheroes to basically being the Star Trek future of the DC universe, that concept is an appealing one. People seem to be okay with seeing a future that does not involve mutants sloshing around in mud pits.
No, but they still have conflicts. I mean, there's still battles going on. I mean, even in Star Trek.
True, but we don't see
that's not the
humanity
focus,
in prison camps.
Right.
With the Earth being a smoking cinder is not the baseline for that. That's what we get in some of these, particularly in Marvel. That seems to be the default idea of the future, is that we are going to mess everything up terribly.
But doesn't it make your heroes stand out more if they can combat something and overcome these feats and tragedies? I mean, that's what a hero is.
Right, and it's sort of the Marvel idea seems to be that they always fail.
Right.
That our heroes will fail to prevent this horrible future, and that's kind of been something we see evolving over time in the X-Men. I mean, the original Days of Future Past happened in 1970 something, or no? It was the
80s. It was the early 80s.
But so that storyline was the first time in that universe they showed the future, and they showed that the world was going to be terrible, mutants were going to be hunted down, but then Kitty Pryde comes back and they fix it. But yet it seems like every time they fix it, somehow they still wind up with that kind of future. We still see that is basically the future for the X-Men. It's
a set moment in time. No matter what you do in the past, the future will always end up the same way.
So pretty much what they're saying is that no matter what they do, the X-Men are going to pretty much fail to prevent the near extinction of mutant kind.
Right, exactly.
and that the world is, no matter what, going to be patrolled by giant hunter-killer robots, and those of us that think mutants are cool are going to wind up at prison camps right along the mutants. That's a pretty grim look
Yeah,
at not only at the future, but a pretty disappointing look in the heroes in general.
No, I agree with you to a point. I just think with the, I mean, minus Legion and having, Utopia per se. I mean, they have minor conflicts. Obviously, there wouldn't be some interesting concepts in the story. You have to set your heroes up to obviously fail, but at one point or another in a creative story, you're gonna read it. Let's say it's 141, 140. You're like, I gotta turn the page. Did they not fail this time? Did they do it? And then with time travel, you in this always trying to fix the future, you have so many threads to play with.
Well, let's look though at the probably I would say the second best super future story for DC was DC 1 Million, which Grant Morrison put together.
Yep.
That world looked pretty good. You've got legacy versions of all the great heroes. The Justice League is still kicking around. We're on Superman number like 853. Batman has basically turned into Iron Batman meets Captain America.
Right.
Just total interstellar badass, and life is basically still pretty good, but yet they found ways to make all of those characters compelling in their own way. I mean, Superman 1 Million was, I thought, one of the neatest versions of that character, because you see him as this tremendously powerful person in the future, but then when we see him come back to our time, he's slowly losing his powers because of the different wavelengths of the sun.
Right.
But he's he basically slowly changes into Golden Age Superman as he gets weaker and weaker and weaker, and he turned out to be really cool. And this whole idea of they were going to change places with the heroes of DC of today, and so those guys got to run around the future while the Justice League of the future got to run around our time for a little while. And they managed to make a really cool story that still involved saying things are going to be okay in the future. We're going to go through some rough times. And that's one thing that I should put in there, is that particularly if you read any of Booster Gold, particularly the old stuff from the early 80s, there is supposed to be a dark chapter in the future for DC. Very similar to the way that Star Trek shows that World War III had to happen before they got to that bright and shining future.
It's got to get worse before it gets better.
That at some point there's going to be this huge disaster that's going to really mess up the Earth, but then we sort of get our shit together after that.
Now, isn't that kind of happening in the new
Booster Gold?
Right. Now, isn't that kind of happening in the New 52 now, especially with the Darkseid and the Apocalypse War and everything that where they're in right now?
Well,
like with Earth 2.
With Earth 2, yeah. With Earth 2, I think that their future is going to be really bright because they have faced down this problem already. We don't really see that in the New 52 main universe, because that involves saying all the good guys lose. No, right now they're just trying to copy Days of Future Past.
Right, I agree. With Terry McGinnis coming back.
Yeah, with Terry McGinnis filling the role of Kitty Pryde / Wolverine. I mean, that when I read that Free Comic Book Day issue, I was pretty immediately disappointed, saying this is the best idea you can come up with, is a knockoff of Days of Future Past with OMAC instead of Sentinels and Terry McGinnis instead of Kitty Pryde.
I enjoyed it because I knew it was a fun read. I wasn't going to go in deep with it, but yeah, I definitely thought Days of Future Past right off the bat. I mean, it's going to be a fun read. I'm picking it up, but I agree with you. It's like Tim Burton doing another movie that he didn't create. He just copied or took something from. So that's DC's kind of saying, okay, the formula was good, and Days of Future Past is making it big in the movies over on the Marvel side. Let's throw something out our way.
Well, and what I think really disappointed me is DC in the past has done such a better job of varying on these different themes. It was, we've talked before on this podcast about Armageddon 2001, which was my first events that I got into in comics. And it has a very similar setup for the idea of Days of Future Past, which was you've got this future where all the heroes are dead and somebody is traveling back in time to try and change things. Only the way they went about that is showing all of these different possible futures. And he kept looking until he found the one that went bad. And so across all the DC titles that they did, you had Wave Rider touching on these heroes, and when he would touch them, he would see their futures. And it wasn't until the very end of the event that he finally found the one person whose future ended badly. In most cases, almost all of them had some form of happy ending, even if they had a little bit of tragedy to them.
Right.
You know, yeah, Superman knocks up Lois Lane and the baby winds up kicking her to death from the inside. That sucks.
Yeah, a little bit.
But at the same time, he winds up, you know, he exiles himself to space, but he winds up falling in love with Maxima, and they repopulate the Kryptonian race together after he, you know, gets over having basically killed Lois with a super baby.
That's a lot. That's a lot of working going on there.
You know, Superman, because they had 4 Superman titles, you see him, you know, his best friend gets shot while he's running for president, and so he winds up taking his place and running for president and basically fixing all the Earth's problems in his first 4 years as president. The Flash, you know, yeah, he winds up at witness protection, and his kid's super speed is kind of messed up. And at the end of the story, he doesn't have his superpowers anymore, but his kid's doing just fine.
Right.
It wasn't until you got to, it was originally supposed to be Captain Atom, and then that got leaked somehow before the internet existed. I still am not quite sure how that all happened. And so they changed it at the last minute to make it Hawk from Hawk and Dove, and it turned out he was the bad guy, which is really kind of a no-brainer that the, you know, avatar of chaos winds up being the guy who makes everything go terrible. But so out of all the, you know, 50, 60 something books they were putting out, they managed to find one out of all of that led to a bad future. And it just seemed like such a more positive way to approach the future than
what's going on now. Yeah, I understand that. I mean, do you think maybe the apocalyptic and the earth-shattering tragedies and events are easier to write than trying to make a compelling, interesting, exciting utopia future?
Well, I think that I think that it is easier to write a doom and gloom future story than it is having to come up with creative ways to differentiate the future from the present without destroying everything.
I also feel, though, maybe, and we've talked about this, and one of the reasons, I mean, the main reason why we have this podcast is we see a lot of this in real life. Could the events and activities in real life influence the writing? Obviously, it's exaggerated quite a bit. We're not having aliens and dark side coming and destroying our planet, but we see a lot of tragedy. We see a lot of these things going on. Could that have affected the writing as well?
Well, I think that there's something to that. There is an aspect of our cultural zeitgeist, if you will, that seems to lend itself towards doom and gloom. If you go and you look, say, for videos on the internet about prophecies of the future, you will find 1,000 videos on how, you know, the powers that be are trying to destroy all of civilization and we're all going to wind up in death camps. For any one video you can find showing you a positive vision of what the future might look like.
Right.
You know, I do this quite often. I'm always out there looking for things that that can show me a positive vision of the future, whether it's ideas of what our transportation system is going to look like or what skyscrapers might look like in the future. And it takes me maybe an hour, 2 hours of sifting through videos of how the world is coming to an end before I can finally find something that just shows me what sort of public transportation system we're going to have in the year 2050.
No, I agree with you. I obviously read online. I agree with you. It takes a long time to do that. Now, you think, how do I want to put this? Oh, it's just like the old saying, bad news, people remember the bad things over the good things, more so. I mean, you give them bad news or you do something bad, they're going to hold it forever. You do something good, they thank you for a day kind of thing where they just forget about it. Is that something that also would be part of why we are telling these stories in the comics like this and why people are focusing on it? We always seem to focus on the negativity.
Well, I think that fear of the unknown is kind of a default state for humans. It's much easier to evoke a reaction in somebody when you show them something to be afraid of than it is to ask them to imagine something positive.
Right. Right. Okay.
I
It's a
think
stronger.
that
It's a stronger emotion by far.
well, yeah, there's a certain cynicism to us, which I think we're just evolved for. I mean, it's far easier to survive if you're looking around you and looking over your shoulder all the time than if you've got your head in the clouds.
Right. Right. You're daydreaming.
Yeah, and so I think that we're sort of hardwired afraid of the future, but that's why I also think that there's a lot of value in fiction that shows us positive visions of the future.
Say that one more time. You were just breaking up a little bit there, Josh.
I said I think it's really easy to evoke a reaction in people by showing them things they can be afraid of in the future, but that's also why I think that there's a particular kind of value to fiction that shows us positive visions of the future.
How so?
Well, I mean, think about the enduring legacy of shows like Star Trek. For as powerful as that has been over the 30-something it's been in existence, there are any number of shows that we saw that gave us, vision of a doom and gloom future, particularly around the time when that came out, and we were still staring down the possibility of nuclear annihilation. If you do it right, there is something in humanity that wants to believe that everything can be okay, that we are going to survive past tomorrow, and that the future is bright. You just have to do it in a way that that resonates with people. And it's much more difficult, I think, to do that, which is why we see so many more of these negative pictures than we do of positive pictures. But when we do finally get a positive picture that resonates with people, they grab onto it with both hands and they hold on for dear life.
Well, could you say the lot of the negativity writing or whatever makes those positive stories more attractive because we do see all that other stuff?
Well, yeah, I think that there's definitely what you're talking about. There's this idea that you can't have light without darkness for it to shine through.
Yes.
And I think that there's some truth to that. I do, but lately, in particular, in comics, it seems like the trend is to just show it's all darkness with very little of that light of the future. For instance, right now is one of the first times in probably 15 years that there's not an superheroes comic.
You're breaking up just a little bit, Josh. Are you moving around?
No, I'm staying in the same spot. No, I said right now is probably the first time in maybe 15 years that there has not been an ongoing Legion of Superheroes comic.
Right, true. And would be...
And I think we see that reflected in the approach that DC's, that they don't really have a positive vision of the future to show us.
Right, and well, isn't the Legion, the superheroes team, doing Justice League 3000?
I think so.
Yeah, it's DeMatteis and oh crap, who's the artist? But DeMatteis is on that one, and that one's a very bleak future as well, since we're cloning our so-called superheroes from the past.
Yeah, rather than staying in the heroes themselves contributed something to an enduring legacy. It's no, they all failed and they're all dead and gone, so we're going to have to cook something up that's kind of like that. It's going to be not so great.
It's like weird science went real wrong.
yeah, and Marvel, it's just been kind of consistent that the general idea of the future is going to... The only positive vision of the future we've ever really gotten out of them was the original Guardians of the Galaxy. We saw that on the flip side of some really bad stuff that was going to happen was that there was a bright future ahead for humanity. Iron Man's technology is all going to get corrupted, and Stark Tech people are going to be running around as marauding mercenaries for a few hundred years. But after about 1,000 years, we get it all together, and we've got humans on planets all around the galaxy.
I think
that's pretty cool.
I think with these stories, deep down, we want a happy ending, and I think seeing all this mass destruction, you're like, all right, the heroes failed, but I know they can do it. I want to know if they prevail, and I think that's the hook. I think it may take, it could be a single shot, it could be a 6-issue arc, it could be a 12-issue arc. even though they failed, you still want to know. I know Captain America can prevail from this. I know the Fantastic Four can come through this. I want to know. Deep down, we want to see a happy ending, but we can't get there until we have some tragedy. That's what makes the heroes, and I think that's why it's so captivating, and why in one way it could be the easy way you want to say of writing this. It's that inner kid in us that wants the happy ending, is maybe subconsciously consciously we don't. We want to see some, galactic fights and a lot of damage and a lot of destruction. But the little kid, or the subconscious part of us, is like, I know you're going to prevail because you're a hero. And I think that's why these stories, and maybe too many stories, I think that's what you're saying, are coming out now, because they know that will capture us.
Well, I think that part of the thing is, though, a lot of that, I think, is just lazy writing. Like, if you go back and you look at what Dan Jurgens was able to do with the original run on Booster Gold, we saw the positive end first. We saw the 25th century as this, shining beacon of really neat stuff happening. Granted, there was a little bit of darkness to it with, what would eventually become the Science Police and the Legion of Superheroes. But what he did, instead of showing us this awful future that we were going to get, was show us a positive future that was still sort of recovering from some bad things that had happened, without showing us all of that negativity right at the beginning. He hinted that it existed, and he hinted that there was this huge tragedy in humanity's past, past being ahead of the 20th century but before the 25th century. But he didn't give us the whole reveal right at the beginning. He made us want to know what it is we did wrong, want to figure out where we went wrong. Because you had Rip Hunter in the future seeing things like, there's huge chunks of data missing. Why is there no information on me? Why is there no information on my family? Why is there so much information missing on all of these heroes from the 20th century? Why is the technology of the 25th century seemingly barely advanced? This looks like it should be 50 years ahead of what we were, not 500 years ahead of what we were. What happened? Where did we skip a beat? And wondering, as opposed to having be shown right off the bat. And I thought that was a much more compelling storytelling device than simply showing everything right off the bat. Did I lose you?
Yeah, you lost me there for a minute. Guys, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody. Sorry about that. As we were talking about the apocalyptic future, maybe happening right now as we speak. Who knows? Uh,
Yeah, I mean, dark portals opening up in the sky. I think I saw a sentinel or two float past the house.
nice, nice. So,
Obviously, they don't. Nobody likes hearing us talk about positive futures. Not
yeah,
even not
obviously,
even our own reality.
obviously. Um, as we talk about this and the positive futures, and we see these, how many? Let's say let's say we'll just pick one group. Let's say Marvel picks their 4 Avengers books. Okay. As we know from these titles that there's earth shattering into another earth, there's interdimensional turmoil, there's galactic fighting, there's time travel that's just going bonkers. What if they decided to do all 4 titles and have this positive outlook utopia future where they succeed? What happens after that? Could we possibly, I mean, obviously it's a story arc, but would we see possibly maybe sales drop?
Well, I think it very much would depend on the kind of stories that you write. One of the things that they found in Star Trek was that it was possible to create conflict even in a utopian situation.
Hmm.
You saw them dealing with really complex things in the original Star Trek. Things like, what does it take to sustain utopia? What happens if and when the system starts to break down just a little bit? What kind of external threats can you create that for these characters to deal with?
Hmm. Okay. Now, what?
If I'm doing, for instance, if I'm doing the kind of hypothetical title you're talking about, now I want to see stories where you can parallel the issues to do with immigration, where you see what do we do if we've got 4 realities that are coexisting but are somehow connected to each other. Are we going to allow someone to regularly cross between Earths? If somebody commits a crime on one Earth, can they jump to the other and try and take on the identity of the person in this reality who didn't do it wrong? Are we going to allow people to, say, be transporting goods across universes? What if there's still dodos on one of these other Earths? Are we going to allow people to start selling dodo eggs here on this Earth again? If they have a surplus of rhinos on one of these Earths, are we going to allow people to start importing rhino horn from this other Earth and selling it on the black market here? I mean, that kind of stuff can come up with really interesting stories if you're creative enough without having to resort to everything sucks, we're all going to die.
Right. Now, could we also let's play? I'm going to play devil's advocate as I do well here. Your utopia, your peaceful future, not necessarily maybe everybody's utopia. Maybe just a select few, depending on the direction of the writer or whose eyes you're seeing it through. We've seen that type of thing as well.
We have, and there are a lot of good stories to be told, sort of showing the cracks in utopia and showing the seedy underbelly of it. One of the best arcs that I remember of Star Trek Deep Space Nine involved showing that underneath all of this for centuries there had still been basically the people who did all the dirty work
Right.
to keep
Right.
this functioning, the super spies who wiped people's memories and stole babies and murdered interplanetary diplomats, that those people were still there.
Could we
They were a lot more hidden than they were in our time.
could we say that the utopia is really the fictional aspect or outlook? That is it ever even possible? It seems the apocalyptic future seems to be more attainable than a supposed real utopia.
Well, and this is why I keep coming back to, I think it is lazy writing in a
Okay.
lot of
Okay.
cases. I think it is way easier to show, it's far easier to break everything
I agree.
than it is to imagine a future in which at least most of the pieces fit together.
I totally agree with you with that. Totally. I mean, because I think it'd be harder to have kind of sucks to say this, but it's harder to have a compelling utopia future than it is apocalyptic. It's easier to do mass destruction and creatures and and galactic battles and stuff like that than it is to do
And
a story.
the trick is
It's
the
not a
trick
fun,
is to never make it perfect.
but then we're not.
When you look back, if I'm going to keep pulling up Star Trek as the example, I mean, if you look at Star Trek: The Next Generation, it was weakest probably in its first 2 seasons because the creator, Gene Roddenberry, decided that he wanted this perfect future to involve no real problems between people, where everybody pretty much got along. And it made for really boring character stories in those first seasons. When
hold off, Josh.
God rest
Josh,
oh, I'm
Josh,
sorry.
hold off. Welcome back, everybody. Sorry about that. Having some technical difficulties, a little own apocalypse going on here. Nobody wants to hear about the nice, cheerful talk that we got going on. Crap.
So what I was trying to get at is that the trick with utopia stories is to find ways to show the cracks. Before we lost it last, I was just starting to get into this. When you look at Generation, which I keep holding up as sort of this shining example of how you do utopian stories right.
It's a good example.
In the first couple seasons of Star Trek: The Next Generation, when it was still under the control of Gene Roddenberry, who created all of Star Trek, his rule was basically he wanted utopia to be perfect. He did not want to show any problems between the crew members. You didn't see any conflict between the senior staff of the Enterprise, and it made for really boring interpersonal stories. None of them had any problems with each other. The world they lived in didn't really have any problems. The only time they faced any threat was from some outside force that tried to tear it all down. When, God rest his soul, Gene Roddenberry passed away between the second or third season, the show was taken over by people who are still human beings, that they can still butt heads, that they can still have differing priorities, that they can still disagree about the best way to approach things, because it's far more interesting to see people who do disagree but then work through it and work past it. You started to see much more where, say the captain and the first officer would have a major disagreement about how to go about solving a particular problem, where you saw the doctor still sort of harboring some resentment against the captain for having been partially responsible for the death of her husband. And when you start to see people working through these issues, it made for much more compelling narrative in each episode, and also sort of a super arc narrative for all of these characters. They didn't take away from any of the perfection of the world that they lived in. They still lived in a world where all of humanity was provided for. Nobody starved. Nobody really died of sickness unless they caught some crazy space virus. But
then it's not even really that. Would it be? Then it's not really utopia by the book.
Well,
term,
the world.
Correct?
Well, I mean, if you want to talk about utopia, I mean, everybody can do whatever they want. Nobody has to have a job unless they want to. We live on 1,000 different worlds. We can travel faster than light. We have more than we could ever possibly use. And when a guy decides to, retire from commanding a starship, he can just go do whatever he wants and run around and race horses. And then if he wants to go back to being on a starship, he can. Like, that sounds like a pretty decent life for just about anybody.
But what?
And they still had all of the same. I mean, the system itself didn't break down. It wasn't that the world was terrible and that life was awful. It was just that they started to show that people could still disagree from time to time.
Right. Now, could we say, let's say you and myself, my utopia might not even be close to your utopia. Now, that's another aspect that we should look at that as far as what each individual. Now, let's say my utopia for me, a perfect life for me, is where I can rob and steal and pillage and do whatever I want and hang out and do things that I love doing. But
well, then Days of Future Past is the future for you. Days of Future Past is the future for you. And I think obviously there's something to that, and we've seen the occasional story of sort of like villains triumph. where the bad guys inherit the Earth, and generally everybody else.
We lost you just a little bit there.
I said we do see those occasional future where bad guys inherit the Earth, and typically it just sucks for everybody else, except for the guy running the show.
Right. Okay, that makes sense.
And those are fun stories, when they're occasional. I think part of the reason I've less and less enjoyed these dystopia future stories is they've become the standard, and it's become this very standard fallback maneuver that when we don't know what to do, we're going to show that the future has completely broken, the world has ended, and we have to somehow figure out a way to fix it. That's just sort of been the default maneuver for both major companies now.
But it works, too. I mean, we can't argue with sales, can we?
Well,
Can we?
we can't argue. At some point, you start to see the law of diminishing returns.
Okay.
Which the more times you try something, the more stale that idea becomes, the less effective it's going to be each time you do it. There's only so many times that they can do this before even the most casual reader starts to say, I've seen this before.
Right. Right.
For instance, now they're doing it in the movies. We're seeing that the X-Men franchise was basically toast. They managed to reintroduce some life into it with X-Men First Class, and now they're pulling out the big tamale and showing us probably one of the best X-Men stories in print was Days of Future Past.
Mm-hmm.
That's because that was the first time they tried this in print.
Right.
They're not going to be able to do this again in the movies in 5 years.
Why not?
Because people will have seen.
No, that may be. I mean, I'm just playing devil's advocate here.
The only reason they're really able to get away with it in comics is that particularly mainstream comics, the audience does sort of refresh itself. X-Men is one of those few franchises that keeps bringing in new readers every few years.
Okay. Now, how about, can we say the Terminator's done it over and over and over? This same apocalyptic, future, and we're going on Terminator 4 or 5 right now?
Well, right, but every time it's been less successful with Terminator, with the exception of Terminator 1 and Terminator 2.
Yeah.
Terminator 3 was nothing like the cultural phenomenon that Terminator 1 was. Right. It was nothing like the box office hit that Terminator 2 was. And a lot of people wouldn't even know it happened if you didn't tell them.
True. This is true. Okay. And do you think it's because of the storyline or just because the character, it's done and over with?
I think it's because there's only so many times you can tell the same story before people get sick of it.
Right.
How many times can we see... Come with me if you want to live. It's like, dude, I came with you last time.
and you took my money last time.
And I'm still in danger. Like, why would I go with you again?
And we keep coming back, and your ticket prices for the movies get higher and higher, and what the hell's happening?
Right, and we keep getting closer and closer to that future in reality. Like, it's just not working, Arnold. Like, you're failing.
No, I totally agree. I totally agree with that. And it works in the comics. Now, I'm sure we won't see another Days of Future Past type movie coming out like that, but that doesn't mean X-Men have done it. It doesn't mean that Marvel and Disney won't do their version of it as well.
Right, but just like we're not going to see that, we're not going to see another alien invasion movie in Avengers.
Right.
They're not going to do that again because that's been done now. There's been all this talk about, is the Justice League franchise going to manage to get to Darkseid before the Avengers franchise gets to Thanos? Because once one of them does it, then the other one's going to have to do something different.
Oh, yeah.
Because audiences will look at it and say, we've seen this already.
Oh, and DC's just going to... Oh, shit.
We seem to be...
DC's already got... Oh, that sucks for DC.
I think that they're going to get there. I think they're going to get there just fine.
Do you think I think they're going to rush Darkseid before we see Thanos? I mean, we kind of already have seen Thanos. It's already in the works, but...
But I think we're going to see Darkseid and his parademons invade before we see the Infinity Gauntlet, because they're really playing a super long game with that, with Marvel. Right. With DC, we're seeing one movie leads right into the next, leads right into the next, leads right into the next. I would be willing to bet you that by the end of the Justice League movie, if not the main story of the Justice League movie, we see Darkseid.
Oh, shit. Too fast, too soon, maybe, but that's DC's way. But hey,
they're doing one major storyline as opposed to a bunch of small ones that connect to each other.
Correct, right.
So it's a different way of going about it, but I also think it's going to help them avoid being compared to Marvel in terms of how they tell their stories.
And as long as they're successful.
Yeah, as long as they're successful. But I mean, getting back to the idea of why they keep telling all these dystopic future stories. Yeah, I mean, my stance on it is I think it's laziness. I think that it's it's very easy to break all the toys and then try and figure out a way to hit the reset button than it is to try and find a way to say still going to be shiny and fun to play with in 100 years or in 50 years.
I agree with you, and I have to say that no matter how much we want the happy ending, we always look for the dark side and the dystopia, I guess you could say, and apocalyptic future. I mean, the covers look better. I mean, let's look at the art. I mean, if something's sitting on the shelf, are you more apt? Most people are going to be more apt to pick up, the shiny happy cover. They're going to pick up going, holy crap, Thor's in deep shit, that kind of
Well,
thing.
but you look at some of the best stories, though, and what they have done is they have shown the cracks in Utopia.
As the cover.
If you think about it, Kingdom Come was in many ways a utopia. All the supervillains have been defeated. There are no real bad guys left.
I don't know. That was an awful dark utopia, dude.
The heroes, right? But that's what I'm saying is that they managed to show that even when the heroes win, when they wipe out all the bad guys and there's nobody left to fight, that the cracks in humanity, the fact that we can't seem to stop fighting each other, that creates its own set of problems.
True. Oh, very much.
That I think was much more interesting than, say, showing a world where Lex Luthor and the Legion of supervillains have managed to defeat the Justice League and they've taken over, and now we see how the next generation of heroes fixes that. We've seen that story before. We had seen that story in DC before. What made Kingdom Come especially unique was we saw what happened when the heroes win, and how it didn't make the world perfect.
Right. It did make it better, just not perfect. Well,
yeah, I mean,
better for who, though?
There's no alien invasions coming. Lex Luthor isn't trying to conquer. Well, in that story, yeah, Lex Luthor is still trying to conquer the world.
Yeah, of course.
But we're not seeing Darkseid or Brainiac.
Pick
or
your battles. You can't win them
over.
all.
But the kids are not okay because
right.
the kids have nobody to fight except each other.
Right. Exactly.
And that I think was really interesting for me, because it showed that even when we win the big battles, the little battles become big battles if we don't deal with them. And that I thought was a much more realistic way of going about it. Because, I mean, if you look around just the state of the DC universe, right, if they all got their act together and decided they wanted to, put a stop to supervillains once and for all, they could do it.
Yeah, but they'd be sacrificing some of their own moral choices.
And that's what winds up happening in Kingdom Come, and that's what made it so interesting. It was the dark side of Utopia as opposed to the blackest, bleakest future you could possibly imagine, and then trying to figure out a way to fix it.
Right. I mean, Batman. If Batman killed the Joker, we got no more Batman. You lost his main, thing that keeps him Batman.
I know. Without Joker, Batman winds up a grumpy old man sitting in the Batcave piloting drones and not talking to anybody. And
depending on what time period, it might even be a little weird having his young boy sidekicks and he's got no villains to fight.
Well, they tore down Wayne Manor, and
yeah.
Batman sits there in a muscle shirt, drinking coffee and piloting robots.
White trash Batman.
That's Batman's future without the Joker. And that's what we saw in Kingdom Come.
Now, is that utopia for Batman?
He seemed perfectly okay with it. He seemed to be enjoying life okay. The only one who seemed really bummed out was Superman.
Oh my God, Batman in a wife beater, drinking some old granddad, watching his drones.
Yep.
Now, as we're talking about this, what are your thoughts as we see this as a trend? Now, have we seen as we've talked about the separate stories of Legion and Legion Superheroes and some of these stories by Grant Morrison showing the prosperous future, we see a lot of the apocalyptic, we see a lot of it through Walking Dead, we see it on TV, we see it everywhere, that there's just dystopia everywhere. Are we going to see this, could we consider this like a fad where all of a sudden we'll get it out of our system? Will we start seeing a trend possibly of a bright future in comics as far as storytelling is concerned? What are your thoughts on the future?
I honestly don't know that I can see the trend changing right now because it's, as often seems to be the case in comics, it's the same people doing the same stories. The only person really different in the mix for DC right now in terms of this event that they're doing is Jeff Lemire.
Right.
Same thing over on the Marvel side of things. It's the same batch of people that handle these big events that have handled them in the past.
But wouldn't it be the higher ups wouldn't that be Quesada's decision to do as well, though? I mean, wouldn't it come to him first?
Well, one would hope that he would, be able to find some sort of positivity in the future of the Marvel universe. But I mean, maybe at some point the leadership will change and we'll see a change in direction. But I mean, right now we've got the same two guys running these companies that have been running them for the past 20 years.
Very true.
So there's no reason to expect that the direction is really going to shift.
Are you saying that there needs to be a changing of the guard?
At some point, there will be inevitably.
There has to be. Right.
I mean, let's face it, these guys will get old and not be able to do this anymore at some point.
Right. They're going to be sitting next to Batman drinking Old Granddad.
Right. So, I mean, at some point we're going to see somebody different take the helm. And maybe that'll finally, when, the torch is passed from Didio to whoever winds up taking over for him, and from Quesada to whoever winds up taking over for him. Maybe at that point is when we see a shift in direction. And maybe that's 10 years from now, maybe that's 20 years from now. I mean, I'm never one to wish ill on anybody personally. So, I mean, for their own sake, I hope that Quesada and Didio live another 30, 40, 50 years.
Right.
And stay healthy the whole time.
I think
more power to them.
Definitely.
But I mean, at some point, maybe they'll get tired of doing this and decide to go do something different.
Right. So before we start wrapping this up, you know what? As we've been talking about this apocalyptic future and just destruction everywhere in comics, we did talk in the beginning, and we were kind of fanboying out here about the Flash and the future of things to come. I want to revisit this topic again, Josh, after a full season of Flash, and let's compare possibly ratings and thoughts as we see the lighter version versus the darker version of the same universe.
Well, you want to talk about a really awesome angle they could show with the Flash is that in the old school Barry Allen comics, the future was such an awesome place that bad guys literally had to travel back in time in order to commit crimes.
Nice. Now,
there were villains that did that. Abracadabra, that was his whole gig. He couldn't get away with anything.
I believe that was even
in the 35th century. So he traveled back to the 20th to be able to commit crimes.
Can I say that was a Batman animated or Justice League Unlimited two-part episode where they had to go back in time to create to commit crimes?
Oh, they did that, and I hope. I mean, that would make a great character for them to show on the Flash. Let's see Abracadabra, the time-traveling magician from the 35th century who comes back in time to commit crimes.
Now,
cool story.
Now, let's do it. Could we use Zoom for that?
Well, Zoom is again, something. He is the product of a utopian future. He wanted to be the Flash of his time,
right?
But there was nothing for him to do.
So then he comes back to our time,
and tries to take the place of the Flash of our time.
Correct. So that in a way he's committing crime, murder, whatever you want to call it.
Right. He's got to kill the Flash. He's got to beat the man to be the man. Right. So he wants to take out the Flash so that he can replace him and be a hero because there's nothing for him to do in the future.
See, that's why they don't write Utopia futures, because there's nothing to do.
because it's boring.
No, I agree with you.
I want to see. You want to tell an awesome story in the future?
Yes.
In a utopia, it needs to be a super villain story.
A super villain story?
Yeah, the person who's up against impossible odds in a utopian future is a supervillain.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah,
Let's see the story about the down on his luck, can never manage to pull it off villain. The Peter Parker of the future is a bad guy.
I like it. Let's write it up. But I do want to revisit this because I think this will be good to see. Granted, it's two different characters, but one, Arrow's a very dark theme. It's very edgy. We're banking that the Flash is going to be more lighthearted, fun, obviously somewhat dark. But it would be great to see. Maybe would it be called like a field test, maybe per se, of just the fact that see what one resonates better with the general public. I mean, will we see, could Flash actually do better ratings than Arrow? I mean, does that give us a good sign to say that they like that more lightheartedness than the dark, gritty tragedy of Arrow?
Well, I think we'll wind up seeing. I think that there is definitely a market for feel good, positive type stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've been going back recently, mostly because I have a huge crush on Yvonne Strahovski. I've been going back and watching a lot of Chuck lately.
Oh yeah,
and that show was just fun.
I love that show.
It
I love
was
the show.
fun. It was full of jokes. It was full of comedy. I mean, it still had great action. It had these huge, you know, massive conspiracy plots and this, that, and the other. But it always remembered to laugh and have a good time, and that was part of what made it great. And I think that we're going to see the difference between The Flash and Arrow is going to be the difference between, say, a show like Chuck and a show like Alias, which are basically the same story.
Yep.
Only in one of them, the hero occasionally slips on a banana peel and falls over and has to,
and he works at Best Buy.
Comic relief and works at Best Buy. Versus, well, and that's very much, you know, the kind of contrast. You got Oliver, who, you know, is the rich playboy who has all the toys. You got Barry, who's got to clock into a 9-to-5 job every day, but has superpowers.
He's the Peter Parker of the DC universe in a way.
In many ways, he is, and I think that if they can find the right balance and they can show the joy of having superpowers balanced with the crappiness of trying to manage that alongside an everyday life, that you're the fastest man alive who's still late for everything, then I think the show's going to be really successful.
I agree. I think it's going to be very successful. Thanks, guys. As we wrap this up, apologize for some of the technical difficulties, but somebody on the high up, maybe it's Joe Quesada, telling us
it's glitches in the Matrix. They
refuse
to let us show. They refuse to let us talk about it. Every time that we went to Alex, it was because that we were going to create some good, positive future right there.
We're trying to develop our utopia right here,
and it's evil time
us
travelers from the future trying to stop us from creating a great future.
The evil version of me is gonna come back in time or something. I'm gonna see him walk through the door in the studio.
Instead of Wolverine coming back in time to stop the world from ending, it's Magneto coming back in time to stop the world from being awesome.
Yes, definitely. I got to say, as we wrap this up, I think we're going to see this trend for a while. I don't necessarily think I'm going to call it a fad. Sales seem to be doing okay, and I think it's basically on sales now. You know, we've said that you can't keep doing this because sales are going to decline. You got to come up with another idea. You can't keep telling the same story over and over and over. Seems to be working. Marvel keeps doing it in many of their titles. DC is now doing it in Future's End. Very similar to Days of Future Past back in the day. I think, you know, they sell. It's the easy standby. I agree with what Josh has said throughout the pod, that it's easy writing. It's the safe but sure way of getting books sold. You start changing the format. Now you're, you know, nail biting to seeing if your book sells or not.
And hey, it's way easier to draw a landscape full of rubble than it is to draw, you know, shiny buildings that all look different.
Not if you're the inker. Because that's a lot of dark crap you got to put in there. Let's give the inker some credit. That's a lot.
You can hide a lot with smoke.
This is true.
You can hide a lot behind smoke and flame.
More like smoke and mirrors. Yeah. So like I said, I agree. I think it's easier, maybe lazy writing. Not to discredit some of the stories that have been out there, because there've been some great ones. But let's see a happy future. Like, even if it's a one-shot, I'd be happy with that. Put out one book a month of a happy future in the Marvel U and the DCU. What do you think, Josh? What's your wrap up?
I would like to see some sort of you know, like you say, maybe at least give us one a month where you show us life is okay in the future. You know, there's a little bit of that, I think, with Batman Beyond, and it appears that they're trying to bring Terry McGinnis into the mainstream right now. Mm-hmm. And maybe my hope is that by the end of this Future's End event, we're going to see, you know, a future for Terry that does not involve zombie Borg iRobot Superman, and he's going to be part of, you know, the Justice League of the future. That would be kind of neat. You know, we used to have that over on the Marvel side with Spider-Girl, where we saw this future that was generally pretty awesome. I would like to see Marvel give us something like that, you know, moving forward as well.
Well, we may see. Let's see what happens with 2099 coming back into the fold.
Well, the 2099 universe kind of sucked. Like,
Hey,
I'm not
hey!
saying quality-wise. I'm not saying quality-wise, but like,
No, I
that
know
was a
it
pretty
sucked.
dark future.
It was,
That was
but
a pretty dark future.
I'm just saying, let's hope maybe they are going to make it a little brighter this time. I doubt
Maybe,
it, but
maybe.
I'm saying
that would kind of be twisting what it was, though, and well, we'll see. We'll see what they do with that. I would like at least something for those of us that want to have a positive outlook on the future, and maybe if it from Image, maybe we'll see some really neat title that shows, what happens in 100 years after heroes have been around for a while.
Right.
Maybe after Kirkman's done literally raping Invincible, he'll go off on that route.
Maybe that's why they'd write kids' books, Josh.
Yeah.
They all have happy endings. Anyway.
Not all of them.
No.
Some of them can be really sad. Some of them can be
sad.
really sad.
There's a big difference between sad and apocalyptic.
Yes, exactly. There's something heartwarming about, you can see your hero die at the end of the book and be buried, and all of his friends and family are there, and you see him looking down from heaven versus the world is in ashes.
Yeah, exactly.
All the heroes failed and everything is terrible.
Darkest Night, right there. Anyway, guys, thanks so much for that. That was a good ending. Thanks for listening to this week's Infinite Crossover, Visions of the Future. And once again, apologize for some of the technical difficulties. I'm gonna go kick the man who's been trying to stop us.
The FCC has anything to say about it. Visions of the Future is gonna be slow internet in our reality. So
yeah, exactly right. Guys, if you want to check out some of the great stuff going on, once again, I can't say enough about the staff over at Fanboys Incorporated. You guys are doing a great job. Check out some of the great articles at fanboysinc.com. Some great stuff. Every day we're pumping out some new stuff, and not your norm stuff either. No more. There's no cookie cutter stuff here. I'm telling you. When we first started doing this, everybody's like, "Oh, you're gonna be like every other site." Well, guess what? We are not. And also go over and check out our sister site, CaplessCrusader.org, for even more. Those guys are cranking out some serious stuff. You can tweet us. Also, you can tweet me at Fanboys Inc. Visit our Facebook page at facebook.com/Fanboys Inc. for a lot of more fun news, DYKs, just good old times. And please send all your hate mail to Mr. Josh Epstein. And where can they send that to, Josh?
You can find me. I'm on Twitter at Crusader06. That's ZERO6. Or you can come visit me and the rest of the crew over at the Capeless Crusader on CaplessCrusader.org. We have all the best, most awesome news coming out of independent comics that you could possibly imagine. Every week we're telling you what great titles are coming out from all these wonderful indie publishers, from Image, Boom, Arcade, Dynamite, Dark Horse. That's our bread and butter over there. We've got some of the best, most in-depth reviews possibly imagine coming out. And every week we do Comic Book Market Maven, where we do some of the best analysis of various different market trends, just pretty much of any site on the comics internet. So please come back, keep checking that out. You can get our staff picks, which just went up yesterday for this week. Those are one of our big things today. And we have some of the best, outside of our friends over on SeekArt.org, some of the best academic level analysis of comics and graphic storytelling. Jeff Hayes has a wonderful piece that just went up today in his After Wednesday column. Literary and genre comic things like Frankenstein and books like that, and which wind up making their way into comics. So I think we're talking about having Jeff on next week, right? He's going to come in and chat with you about that.
Yeah, well, we might. We have to talk about that because the holiday's coming up. So we might have to.
Oh, right. So,
but
make sure you stay tuned to all of our stuff on Twitter, and we'll be letting you guys know.
Definitely.
Here very soon. I'm gonna not step away, but occasionally let some of my colleagues from Capeless step on here and give you guys some of their insight. So I hope you all look forward to that.
Also, can you? Do we have a con update for this weekend?
We do. Timmy Philpott, who reports on DC News for Fanboys Incorporated and who reports on Vertigo News for Capeless Crusader, is going to be at Motor City Comic Con in Detroit. She's going to be walking the floor. She's going to be seeking out some of these awesome creators for interviews, trying to ask some awesome, tough questions, and she'll be attending a lot of the panels that are going on there. So if you are in the Motor City area, be sure to go give her a shout, say hello. And if you have, if you have any questions you think that we should be asking, be sure to let us know, and we will do our best to be the fans' voice on the floor of these conventions. And looking at our schedule here, it's gonna start shaping up to be a busy summer as far as conventions go.
Oh, very, very much so. We got in just a couple weeks. I got June 14th. I'll be at New York Comic Fest in White Plains, New York. Another Cliff Galbraith, Robert Bruce, and Dan Greenfield production. David Finch, I believe, is going to be there, and guest of honor, Mr. Scott Snyder. So we will be trying to get to meet with Scott this time around and so many others. And then the day after will be June 15th at the Albany Comic Con near Albany, New York, 205. One Senate, Paul Harding, John Hebert, Richard Clark, and we'll be podcasting live from the floor. Plus, we'll also be doing a creator spotlight panel with three creators from different aspects of the field. We're going to have Mr. Mark McKenna, who's anchor and artist, Joey Esposito, and Mr. Wrestling panel, Q&A, so you guys will have a good time. If you're up in the upstate New York area, join us June 15th. Tickets are only $10, guys. Check that out. He hasn't raised prices in a very long time, so just a lot of fun over there. Yeah, I'm excited for the con season. I can't wait. You will see down the road, as we say these names out, you don't know what they look like, but they will be wearing official uniforms, so don't worry. No polyester button-ups. But there'll be some Fanboys Inc. / Capeless Crusader T-shirts, so you'll be able to notice them. So as we grow, we're gonna be taking over a con one day, Josh. We'll just be like a massive, like a flash mob of FBI.
Oh, I can't wait! I can't wait. We're just we'll stroll in. We all have to have matching sunglasses, and we'll bust open the double doors and just roll in like the cast of Reservoir Dogs.
There you go. Guys, thank you so much for listening, and join us next Monday for RSRG, Random Shit, Random Guy. Mr. Philip Rose will start your week like he does every Monday over on fanboysinc.com. Josh, please send us off.
So I will tell you to remove your headphones, think some happy thoughts about tomorrow, and go read something.
Peace.